of the agenda as presented. Councillor Vauden, Deputy Reeve Campbell. All in favor? Carried. Disclosure of pecuniary interest, if any. None noted. Moving to the consent agenda, is there any of the points councillors would like brought forward for separate? Councillor Sype?
It's not for separate. I just want to make mention when we review the police services is that the 4.3.3, John Brown has provided a letter to council with regards to the information at the public meetings. So I just wanted to make sure that that was documented again, that when we talk about the police services budget.
Okay, not to be leading, but 4.32, the Township of Selwyn resolution on hockey seasons makes a lot of sense to me, but since I can't make a motion sitting here, it's to have ice going in the beginning of October instead of starting in September, and it's contacting Ontario Women's Hockey and Canadian Minor Hockey in Ontario.
Same, Ontario Minor Hockey Association, okay. And probably under that would be the women, the girls as well. Yeah.
I'll move for discussion purposes that we bring that item up.
Okay, thank you. Pat, do you want to add anything?
Well, I just want to share that this has been a long time discussion at SWRFA, which is the Southwestern Ontario Facilities Recreation Facilities Association, that minor hockey continues to want the season to start earlier and earlier in order to get their playoffs completed in time so that they can have the All-Ontario Championships. The challenge is that they're asking, as this year we're putting ice in August, they want it beginning of September, and then by end of January, nobody's on the rinks. Everybody's finishing hockey by end of January, and it's still winter outside. And so we would love to see this all move forward to keep the kids on the ice later when it's actually cold outside. It's very expensive to have August and September ice. So we would concur that this is a good recommendation to support either this letter or something like it ourselves.
Anything further from council? All in favor of the motion? Carried. And that will be circulated. Is there anything else in the consent agenda? Councillor Sype.
I just want to make mention to council that 4.3.8, the response letter to this council regarding Bill 175. We're going to look at it at greater detail at the Police Services Board and make a comment if we need to regarding that letter from the minister.
Okay. Thank you. Making a motion for the rest of the consent agenda. You receive it. Councillor Ritzman-Daninga and Councillor Sype. All in favor? Carried. Okay. And then public meetings. We'll move to 6.11. And Laura, can you add a little to this one, please?
Sure. So this is an application for severance, file C29 2018. And just a note for council, the county has renamed their filing system so that going forward, consents will be known as C files instead of B, as they formerly were, because C is for consent. So the owner of the property is Les Caldwell, and the applicant is Stephen Caldwell, who owns the abutting house property abutting to the farm. So the property is part lot 41, the east half, concession 2 in East Wawanosh on Long Creek Road. So this application is for a lot enlargement. The area proposed to be severed is 1/2 acre, and the area retained would be the farm, and it's approximately 98 acres. The farm is zoned AG1-5 and NE2, a very small portion at the back of the property, and is also designated agricultural and natural environment in the official plan. You can see on this aerial, it shows the red area outlined to be severed from the farmland. And then the area outlined in the green there is the property that is being proposed to merge with and enlarge. So the piece of property that's being proposed to merge currently has no agricultural use. It actually contained a former residence on it that was demolished prior to this application being submitted. And right now it just has a small detached garage as well as some trees and a large open space in the parking. The remainder of the farmland is being used for agricultural use and also contains a barn there, as you can see. So the property is being proposed to merge to was severed off of the farm previously, and this would be enlarging it to create additional lawn and parking space for them, as well as the ability to add an accessory building should they want in the future without putting it in front of the existing residence or disrupting the area for the septic system. A photo of the proposed severed parcel, you can see there. That building is not the one that would be going with the severed parcel. That would remain with the retained farmlands. It's the one there beside the trailer at the back. And this is the structure that would be going with the proposed severed, and you can see the location of the former residence that was on there. So reviewing this application against the policies, it complies with the agricultural standards of the county official plan and the North Huron official plan. The consent policies in the North Huron official plan permit a severance in an agricultural area, including land to be conveyed to an abutting non-farm use, provided a minimal amount of farmland is being removed from the farm, and it's for convenience or servicing purposes. So as you can see, this wasn't previously part of the farm or being worked, so it's not removing anything further from the farm. The proposed lands, once they're merged with the abutting property, would enlarge it, but the retained farmland would still meet the minimum size of 38 hectares as identified in the North Huron official plan for a minimum farm size and maintain their agricultural use. There were no concerns raised during the circulation of this application, and there were no comments received from the public. You can see here a photo of the retained farmland. It's a very small portion of natural environment at the rear of the property is not expected to be impacted by the proposed severance. So it does conform to the North Huron official plan, and it's recommended for approval, to be recommended for approval by council with the included conditions in the report.
Okay. How does council receive it?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Approve?
I'll second.
Okay, Councilor Knott seconds. Any further discussion here? Okay, all in favor of the motion? Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. 6.12, there's an offer to purchase. Richard?
Thank you, Reeve. So this item is regarding that portion of land that is by Crookshank Park. Council has received information on this item at the previous council meeting and had directed staff to advertise the sale or that piece of property as surplus and proceed with the disposal of that property. The individual or the company that currently has an encroachment agreement with that for that piece of land has put in an offer which is attached to this report, and so that organization, that company has first right of refusal, and so they have exercised that right to put in the offer. So if council should choose to accept that offer, there is a bylaw prepared to go along with the report as well for this meeting, and that could authorize the reading clerk to sign that bylaw.
A motion for this.
There's a motion for that as well. The motion for this item is that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives the May 22nd report of the clerk/manager of IT entitled Offer to Purchase, May 22nd, 2018 for information, and further that council approves an exception to section 19.1 of the procedural bylaw to allow bylaw 51, 2018 to be passed at the May 22nd, 2018 council meeting.
Councillor Knott,
I'll
you're
make the motion as written.
moving. Councillor Ritzman Teninga seconding. Further discussion? All in favor of the motion? Carried. Okay, 6.1.3, traffic enforcement, Highway 4 and County Road 25. Richard?
Thank you, Reeve. So for this report, as outlined in the report, what we're proposing here that council consider is making amendments to the traffic bylaw for the intersection at County Road 4 or County Road 25 and Highway 4 to designate the North Huron portions of that intersection as no parking zones for a certain length. 70 meters westerly from Highway 4 north side, 90 meters easterly from Highway 4 north side, 150 meters northerly from County Road 25 on the east and west side. And so staff have been working with county staff, and the county has been kind of taking the lead on this. They've been in discussions with Central Huron. At this time, they haven't received an update as to where Central Huron is with that particular item, when they may be considering it, or what their process is to move forward. But I know that this has been a concern for council, and so this is one item that that in working with the county, that suggestion has been made to try to mitigate some of the risk at that intersection. So if council wishes to proceed with this direction, a amended traffic bylaw could be prepared for the next council meeting to designate those zones. No parking zones, it is.
Councillor Knott?
I'll make the motion to accept the report and proceed, but I do have a question.
Okay, I'll take a second from Councillor Hallahan. Going back to Councillor Knott.
I'm just looking at the picture here, and I'm wondering if it would be a little bit better idea parking on the west side of Queen Street coming north, whether that no parking zone should be extended to up just past Sunward Drive, so that the sight lines of people coming off Sunward there are not blocked as well. And if we should consider the same thing at the bottom of the Sunward Drive, that it be no parking just to the further west, so that you don't have that up there, so that the vehicles will not be blocking the view of anyone coming off there. That would be my request, that we ask for that.
Just past the driveways.
Yeah, I think you should just go north of Sunward there, so that, anyone coming out of there will not have a vehicle blocking them there.
Oh, okay.
I can discuss that with the county, and they prepared the measurements for us and made the suggestion, so I can see what their feelings are on that, on extending those.
Yeah, it's just that it would then give them a clear view. I would also ask at the same time that I know that in the site plan approval, which we're not involved in, that they designated, and I was surprised to find that out, they designated that island section between the two driveways at Tim Hortons to allow parking in between the two driveways. And that was part of the site plan approval?
Yes.
Yeah. And I just question that. That really doesn't make sense to me. I find that a rather dangerous place to decide.
It was always in, right from the original plans.
Which we had no control of. I just wonder if it's a possibility if that can actually be rescinded or reviewed. I don't know. Perhaps we can ask our planner back here.
Do you have a clear understanding of what he's asking?
To remove some parking on their truck.
Do you know which section I'm talking about?
I think so, yeah, I didn't see that site plan or work on it, but, as far as an amendment to it, it would be at council's approval,
I would have to go through, that's gotta go to Central Huron.
central council,
Yeah.
yeah, because it would be them who approve the site plan then. Unless they said it was a minor, and then if that's in their site plan.
If we were to request, I guess my question is, how would we request that they review that as our council to them? Who do we go to? Do we go to planning or do we go to Central Hearing?
It would be basically a separate motion to please look at what we're doing, and if they could do the same on the other side of the County Road 25. I think it would be better in a letter from North Huron to Central Huron stating what we are doing to try and have that corner less congested, and that if they would please consider something similar to what we're doing. That would be an extra motion. Deputy Reeve?
This is a county road. Who is going to enforce this? Will be the OPP? Is that complaint driven? Or how is that going to be enforced?
It would be, so the traffic bylaw in this instance would be complaint driven. So, it would, I suppose there could be the instance where a complaint would come in and by the time someone were to respond, the person may be gone. So, but yeah, it is complaint driven.
It's pretty hard to enforce this.
Sorry.
Like this, where we have it all marked, it's going to be a problem to enforce it. There is lines and stuff on the road now, and I thought maybe it was for landing planes or something. All the strips that were on it. I wasn't sure what it was for.
Councillor Vaughn?
There may be an awkward hint answering that question. Under the financial impacts paragraph, it says there would be a cost in terms of staff time to enforce the no parking zone. So are we turning our staff into bylaw enforcement officers? And I don't know why that statement is in here.
It's through you to Councillor Flood. It's just more or less to take into account that if a complaint did come in and staff had to respond, that would be staff time spent to go down to enforce that, which isn't spent doing that right now. Staff would enforce other no parking zones currently, but that isn't designated as a no parking zone at this time. So
nobody is going to be responsible for it?
That I think the long and the short of it, it would be looking at if the signs were being ignored, there would be cameras placed and they would record time of vehicles parking there, and with the activation of moving them again, that would be another time for.
And the county is going to do this.
I'm not sure who is. The technology is not that expensive for that. Pat?
I just wanted to add that when we were working with Transfigure Town and Cowbell on large-scale events at the campground and at Cowbell, we had a challenge when we ran this year's event because there was no enforceable no parking along those roads. Yet we didn't want people parking there due to the massive amounts of traffic. So having this no parking bylaw, and as an event holder, we would have the police on site to ensure no parking and move cars if they should. So it's twofold. It's the day-to-day safety as well as large-scale event safety, and having that no parking zone to be able to enforce the parking bylaw by the OPP that have been hired to help facilitate the events. I just wanted to point, that's just an added feature of doing this no parking zone.
Councillor Syed?
So I guess my question is, are we more concerned about day-to-day or event? Because for what Councillor or Deputy Reeve Campbell has mentioned, day-to-day is going to be very difficult to enforce at all, in my mind, if there's nobody in the area. And obviously, sending pictures or whatever isn't going to do us any justice. The question I have though is, I like the fact that if it's during event planning, you know, it could get the word could get out fairly quickly that there's a definite need for that to not be there, and maybe that's where the real niche of this proposal is. I just, it would be interesting to me to know what complaints we've had currently. Like what the count is, have the county received any complaints at this area about parking completely? They're setting this up. I guess my question is, have they received the complaints and that's why they're asking to change this? I don't know. That would be my question.
I can partly answer that in talking to the County Highways Department. Yes, they have received complaints. Councillor Allen.
To answer Trevor, it's both. It's both. There's an event going on or day to day, simply both. It's what we're talking about. And the fact that if some day-to-day or event goes on in the police there and you're parked in no parking zone, simple.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that one's more important than the other. What my thinking is that the OPP or the people who are going to be enforcing this bylaw are going to be in the area more likely at an event than they are in the day-to-day function of that bylaw. So there's lots of bylaws that are now that are complaint driven. So unless they're not in the area or unless they don't see it specifically, they're not going to enforce it. So that's my question. That's all. I think of the fact that they're enforced there because there's an event and they're already there and they're saying the vendor or the municipality have told them, please enforce this bylaw because we know there's an issue. I think that's a perfect opportunity to enforce the bylaw. But on a day-to-day, I don't think there's going to be, by the time, like we've all talked about, by the time the complaint comes through, they're gone. And there is not an enforcement that you're going to see. So it's always been a question about, do we put a bylaw in that is unenforceable?
Councillor Knott?
Just to point out, the bylaw is enforceable, but unfortunately it will not be the OPP no matter what, because under the costing program that we currently use, the OPP is not obligated to enforce municipal bylaws, parking or otherwise. Whether or not, and I'm not sure in that area what Central Huron's contract calls for with the OPP, whether they would enforce on that side of the road, but ours definitely would be up to us. And it would be recommended that we actually have our staff members who are bylaw enforcement officers check on the area on a regular basis to enforce it. Because that's the only way it's going to happen. So during an event, that might be a different situation with hired police officers where they would then be an employee of the municipality enforcing it. That could be a different situation. But on a day-to-day basis, the OPP aren't going to enforce it anyway.
Going to Kirk?
Yes, certainly. It is up to our department to enforce that as per the bylaw, but we don't have the manpower to sit somebody down there. If we're going to do it, maybe we'll do it for a day or two just to make the presence known. Maybe issue a notice of violation or a warning, and that might take some time. But aside from, by the time we get the call, drive down there, they're going to be gone with their doctor or what have you by the time we get there. So it's certainly going to be hard to enforce. We can start with the postage of signs and maybe go from there. Or if there is an event that's taking place, maybe we have to work a Saturday or a Friday night or what have you, just to make it well known at that time and then move forward.
Okay. Just because it might be difficult and cannot be enforced all the time, I'm using handicap parking. There is a lot of abuses of that. And if you don't get caught by a bylaw control officer or a policeman that is willing to lay those charges, it's just the same. That you take a chance, and there's a percentage of the time you might get caught. Councillor Singh?
The one thing I think we've all talked about here is the communication between North Huron, Central Huron, and the county. Because the one thing I'm thinking of is whatever enforcement we decide is in the best interest on our side of the road, you know, the county and the Central Huron should be on the same page about the enforcement on their side of the road and in their jurisdiction. At the end of the day, we should all be on the same page about how we're going to enforce this bylaw or what, to ensure that one, that it's being enforced the way it's intended to do, what it's supposed to do, but also the fact that we're all on the same page. We don't need to be going against each other. We're all about doing the same thing. So, you know, I think having the discussion that as Councillor Knott suggested about with Central Huron, like getting staff to have that conversation with them about the road, the signs, and all that. I think that to me is a good plan, because I would like to make sure that whatever enforcement bylaw we put in force, there's a similar thought from them perspective and how that they're going to enforce it as well.
Richard?
Through you, Reeve, to in response to Councillor Sykes there. So those conversations have been taking place. We have been working with the county as the facilitator, and they have, to our knowledge, been having those conversations with Central Huron. Certain staff have been on vacation, so I just haven't received an update prior to this report coming forward. So once we know the direction Central Huron is going, for sure we want to match the direction that they're going as far as enforcement with whatever we're doing. So, but I think getting back to the motion that Councillor Knott is referring to, I think that was more so related to the mountable curb, right? So yeah, so
something we put in the letter to Central Huron.
Any further discussion? We have a motion.
yes, so we get it.
Yeah. No. Okay, the vote on that motion, all in favor? Carried. Okay, Councillor Knott?
So would this be the appropriate time to make a motion for the letter to Central Huron?
Yes.
Asking for their cooperation in regard to these parking bylaws, and to ask them if they would consider reviewing that site plan approval for the mountable curb parking.
Second.
Okay. Seconded. Is there any further discussion on this? All in favor? Carried. Okay, moving to 6.21. Trevor, Chair of the North Huron Police Services Board, Police Service Budget Review.
Thank you, Reeve. So the Police Services Board took the direction of council on May the 7th. And we had a meeting on, just want to make sure I get the dates right. We had we had the original budget on the 10th. We did a review of that budget and requested, and the chief had brought a preliminary budget to that meeting on the 10th. In which, therefore, after that meeting, the board directed the chief to again review scheduling and that type of stuff with the association to ensure that we have labor, as well as making sure that we had things in the appropriate year. So from a transitional perspective, because that's what council had asked us to, if we could delay stuff, we could, and we did based on that. On May the 15th, we had the budget that you see up here in front of you that was presented. It is small. I do apologize for that. I didn't want to get it on one sheet. The one thing I do want to note to council, the police station budget that are in the middle part that's blank, the Police Services Board has no authority to review that budget. That's facilities. They look at that budget. What you're seeing here is just the operational budget of the police service for the year 2018. And also the police board looked at providing council here a preliminary look at 2019 and 20 for their review for this particular year. So one of the things I do want to say is nothing on this sheet of paper or what you've had in your hand should be surprising. All we've done, all that has been done between the May the 7th and May the 15th is push money from 2018 to 2019. So in the review of that budget, I did make some notes with regards to what kind of service that we're providing. So in the labor part of the salaries for 2018, this represents 24 hours a day, 7-day-a-week coverage, which existing with 2 12-hour shifts, as consistent with prior years. The difference is due to negotiations, there was a 4.5% pay increase for existing officers and a hiring of 3 recruit officers, which would start in September. The original budget that was presented on May the 7th had those recruits starting in June. So they would start in September, they would go off to police college for 3 months, they would come back on January 1st. However, they can't go to police college without being an employee of the municipality. So we're paying them in September. The hiring has always been a discussion about health and safety of the officers that we've had. The change in policing over the past 3 years has been significant in the different level of incidents that we are having in the municipality and as policing as a whole. It's not just the Wing Police Service. It's the OPP, and everybody's having a different level of incidents that are occurring, and this brings us up to the standard of two hiring or 2 fully trained officers per shift starting in January of 2019. The memorandum of understanding that the Police Service Board signed with the association suggested that we would have 2 fully trained officers by April of 2019. So all we've done is pushed those officers from June to September, and we're hiring an additional 2 officers in January. And I do want to clarify what the conversation about the hiring of the officers. So on May the 7th, I mentioned that we were hiring another sergeant. We're not hiring another sergeant. We're hiring 5 recruits, 3 in September, 2 in January. Those 5 recruits they're a lower rate than our first constables that we would have. However, they are recruits. As years go on, their salary goes up just like in any other pay grid system. The additional sergeant would come from our existing complement. The intention of that complement would be they would move from a constable to a sergeant to backfill the supervisory roles of the secondary shift. Because right now we have only 1 sergeant, and ultimately that that supervisory position would get exhausted by having that number of staff and that number of constables having to worry about that supervisory role. So that's what the staffing model has changed. It didn't really change. The money that was there, the chief has always done it that way. I misunderstood the conversation about what we were hiring. Okay? So in 2019, the dollars that it represents is an additional 4% pay increase to the existing officers that we have, plus the cost of living. And as I explained to this council before, that those two pay increases in the next 2 years are to get us to equivalent pay for equivalent service from existing services within the catchment area. So we took the average of the 5 areas around us, one of them being Brantford. It was a city-oriented position, but we took the OPP, Saugeen Shores, Hanover Police, the OPP, and West Grey. Took those dollars, what they would be getting by the time 2019 came, when the contract ended, and our officers would be paid equivalently to what they are. Currently, they're not being, prior to this agreement, they were paid at least 8 to 10% lower than those services around us. So at the end of the day, fair and equitable was the conversation in health and safety. And the board chose that the fact is we need that. We need health and safety as an imperative that we keep it. And the fact that we have been underpaying our staff, in essence, for the service that they're providing, the same service in every other municipality, the concern was why, and that was the issue from that perspective. So 2 more recruits would start in January, and they would be fully trained, gone to police college, and back by May, which would accept to our association of understanding with the police association. So you would have 2 fully trained officers on site each shift starting in May of 2019. And in that 2019 is also a 4-month transitional period with a chief, because we're in the midst of trying to recruit a new chief, as our chief, if everybody doesn't know, is retiring in April of 2019. So by May, we would have 1 chief, 1 deputy chief / inspector, 1 sergeant, 9 constables, and a special constable or administrative assistant. That's the complement of the Wayne Police Force as of May or April of 2019. And as you can notice in 2019, there's a new cruiser, which is the replacement of the Dodge Charger. There's no other additional capital being considered, because the capital that they have, the police service has right now, will be a shared resource. So computers, all that stuff is all shared resources. So we're not expecting to buy anything more other than the fact that we have to clothe them and put a firearm in their hand. So as this reads, this reduction in the budget as presented by Donna is just a pushing of money. That's all it is. It's a sheer push of dollars from 2018, 2019. So any increase that was to the spending limit or the wing award taxes is just being delayed. That's all that's happening here. Is there any questions?
Deputy Reed.
So you made the statement, Councillor Seat, that the contract that you have now will end December 31st, 2019.
That is correct.
So you have a 2,000 budget in for the next time, 2020, not knowing for sure where things will be at.
The costing that we presented here was which generally budgeted without knowing what the actual negotiation was, is a standard cost of living, which is around 2%. What doesn't impact this as well as these recruits grow in their position, they're starting at a wage of about $58,000 a year. By the time they get to 2020, they're going to be making somewhere in the neighborhood of $98,000 a year base. That's their base salary. No overtime, no nothing. That is what their base salary is based on 2,080 hours.
Councillor Hallahan.
Yeah, and you did say these recruits that are sent off to school for training, we are actually paying them, the municipality is paying them?
That is correct.
To take their training too?
That is correct. The municipality have to be employees of the municipality or the Wing and Police Services Board in order to be sent to police college. They need to be hired by the North Huron Police Services Board.
There has to be a sponsoring police organization for them to even get enrolled at it.
Correct.
Deputy Reeve?
You are replacing our chief. So how do you know, how can you put into the budget for what it's going to cost you for a new chief? Are you guaranteed the price that you are paying the chief now? It could change the budget considerably.
Not our issue.
So all I can say to you is what has been put in the budget is by the current chief today is the cost of a chief in around the municipality in the surrounding areas. But I will tell you right now, it won't be for what we're paying our current chief.
Okay, I think I'll intervene here. Thank you, Trevor, for trying to keep that as concise and factual as possible. The real thing, and Dwayne can back me up if I get off target a little, but a police services board, the only thing they are obligated to give council is a figure for capital expense and a figure for operating expense, so that we cannot go through line by line anything they do in the budget. The Police Services Board actually has control, and council is bound to either ask them, such as we did the last meeting. They have worked through and did their best to accommodate what council asked, and I personally thank them for that. But council has no control over anything except a capital number and an operating number at the bottom of their budget. And that is to be transparency so that council is not dictating what police do and what the Police Services Board. Dwayne, did I get it right?
Yeah, so essentially in terms of the Police Services Board is a separate entity from the municipality, and it has its own, it's under the Police Services Act. It's not governed by the legislation that municipal council is governed by. And as Arif has indicated, in terms of the Police Services Act, basically indicates that in terms of the Police Services Board, council municipality is the, I'll call it funder for the, for the Police Services Board. So the Police Services Board is tasked with preparing a budget. They need to determine what the appropriate method of policing is and appropriate, staffing and resources and all that. And then as Arif has indicated, giving council an operating number and a capital number. They're not obligated under the legislation to provide a line-by-line budget. If they provide that, that's completely voluntary. It's not uncommon, but if it is provided, the municipality can only look at the bottom number and can't look at, they can ask questions about the line-by-line, but can't challenge, take issue with what is in the line-by-line budget. Council and the Police Services Board can go back and forth as many times as they want in terms of Police Services Board bring forward the number, council says, can you do better, sends it back, which is what recently has happened. Police Services Board has come back. They are giving council a revised number. Council can accept the number, or council can say, you know, we're not accepting it. You know, we're going to send it back and you want a further, if you want a reduction, or you can go to the extent of giving a number that you want the Police Services Board to achieve. If the Police Services Board doesn't feel that they can provide the service with the dollar amount that has been approved by council, they can appeal it to the arbitration board. And the other arbitration board then reviews the matter, makes a decision. Whatever the decision the arbitration board makes, that's binding on council. So the board says it's, so if the board comes back and says, you know what, we think the Police Services Board needs 800,000, then we as municipality are on the hook for 800,000. Whatever the arbitration board decides, that is binding on us as municipality. So I don't know if that. So just,
Councillor Vaughan?
I'd like to express an opinion. It's just an opinion, and I don't have the numbers in my head right now, but in a very general sense, it seems to me that for 20 years, I've heard that the Wingham community wants its own police force, and they don't care what the cost is, the extra cost. That's been the norm as far as I am aware of the opinion from the Wingham community. And I think that the reason that 6 of our present council approved the retention of the Wingham police force was that fact that we assumed that the Wingham community wants to keep its own police force regardless of what the cost is. And I think that's the basis that we've gone forward this far as we had. But I think it's been irresponsible of the police board to come up with a program where the overage in cost gets pushed into the future. It doesn't take anything off the future, it just moves it forward. We're ending up, apparently, I think the mood in Wingham is changing, with a police force that we can't afford, or that they can't afford. And that's what my concern is, and I think that's where I see us at the present moment.
Actually, that's going back and rehashing previous decisions made that I don't think we'll go back and rehash anything else tonight if possible. Is there any more discussion? Councillor Hallahan?
I had a ratepayer mention to me, this budget that's going through, are we allowed to pass only the 2018 police budget and no more?
Actually, what we're looking at is the only thing before us is the 2018 budget information. This is 2018. That is knowledge for the future, but that is the future.
I cannot see us, we've already sent this back once to the police board, and we didn't get any reduction, or the people in Wayne didn't get any reduction, okay? So I don't know why you'd send it back again, really, if that's what it's going to be. If there's no, they were looking for a reduction in money, I think. All we did was just push it.
Councillor Syke, do you have a comment?
I just want to reiterate that at the May 7th meeting, I specifically asked council to provide me a number that they would so like to have as a 2018 number. There wasn't a counselor that wanted to give me that number. And the question was determined through the discussion was, do whatever you can, push money out, delay whatever you have to do in order to bring us a revised number that makes it palatable, is the way I interpreted what the discussion was. That is what we did as a police services board. The 19 and 20 numbers, just to mention to Councillor Howland, those numbers were just for information to explain to you what we did. That is the only reason why they were presented there, other than the fact that they're just telling you what's going on. Like we always do 1 year at a time. The Police Services Board has been more apt to look at the next 3 to 5 years now, because we need to look at this, because we don't want to be having this conversation with council next year at this time, because the conversation was you didn't know what the numbers were going to be. Council now knows what they're probably going to be based on what's the process of what's going through. So that's why they were presented this way, and the only reason why they were presented this way. And that's one of the reasons why it came. And this information that was presented tonight reinforces the discussion, like I said, about the ratepayer John Brown, his information states the same stuff. So that's why I'm making a point that that's why it was there. So that's why we've done it that way. And I wanted to make sure that the council was aware of what's going on.
Councillor Hallahan.
So to make it quite clear, this budget tonight is only for 2018.
That's correct.
The new council could send it to arbitration or whatever they want to do.
That is correct.
Is there anything else that there isn't any real motion suggested here that basically it's letting the revised budget that was brought tonight be part of the township overall budget, which basically is the next topic that unless somebody wants further discussion, that we will assume that this budget can be, police service budget, can be part of Donna's budget, overall budget. Councillor Slate?
No, yeah, I'm not going to mention anything more about the police services budget. As a counselor, I have had lots of conversations with ratepayers over the last 2 weeks about how does this decision, or how was the decision that was made on March the 22nd or whatever day that was, how does that decision get revisited? So what I'm asking the Reeve and staff, if they could provide ratepayers and the people who are watching, what has to happen in order for that decision to be revisited? Because that's the question I'm being asked more frequently than ever.
You can work on that, Dwayne?
Yeah, so you need in accordance with the procedural bylaw, you would need a motion, as we've done once previously, in terms of to be a vote of council, basically for reconsideration of a decision that council has previously made. And then after that motion for the reconsideration, then there'd be a discussion in terms of what is it from that point forward that we would, what is it that council be looking for, and what is it that you'd want staff to undertake to do?
Councillor Knott?
Correct me if you wish, but I believe that there is only one councillor who can make that motion, because it has to be done by the one who voted against it, and that would be Councillor C.
Councillor Slate?
And I was under and this is why I'm asking, because I was under the impression that the motion was to keep service And therefore, the majority of the people who voted for that motion needed to revisit it. So I think we need the clear understanding of what the procedural bylaw says, because it's fuzzy. Because that's the conversation we need to figure out. Because I'll tell you right now, if it's me, it's coming in 2 weeks. I'm telling you that now. But I don't know that, because if it's not me, I need to understand.
Which way was it?
That, Richard?
I have my recollection, but I think I'm older.
Yeah. Because we did it quasi incorrectly the last time. We didn't have to do what we did. That's what I'm saying. Let's clarify.
So reconsideration, under the procedural bylaw, reconsideration reads, no decided matter may be reconsidered more than once during the term of council. A recorded vote shall be required for all motions to reconsider a previous decision of council. Reconsideration in the first year. Within 1 year after a matter has been decided by council, within that term of office, a member who voted in the majority may present a notice of motion to reconsider that matter. Such notice of motion to reconsider shall be referred to the next regularly scheduled council meeting and shall be placed on the agenda under the appropriate department.
So it has to be one of the 6 that
Yeah.
voted for it.
All right. So I will make the motion to reconsider. If that's what we need to do, I'll do it for staff to proceed to find out what exactly is required. That pretty much cover it.
Seconder, Kaminga. Councillor Vaughn.
Just another comment. Does this prevent us from using the revised budget provided by the board in our
We have
current
to
budget
work with
that
the
we
current
desperately need to pass tonight?
We have to work with the current information that we have, and the revised budget is part of what Donna is bringing forward.
Good.
Okay. Are we ready for that motion to be voted on? All
You
those in
need this
favor?
recorded, don't you? Don't you need this
Oh,
as
yes.
recorded?
Yeah.
We did. Deputy Reeve, please vote.
Yes.
Councillor Hallinan?
Yes.
Councillor Knott?
Yes.
Councillor Vaughn?
Yes.
Councillor Syke?
Yes.
Councillor Kaminga?
Yes.
Reeve Vincent?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Okay. Okay, moving forward, the 2018 budget and tax rates, 6.22, or 6.2.2. Donna, take it away.
Thank you, Council. So my report is in the agenda package, and it is based on the revised police board budget that we have received. So I did want to just clarify that overall, though, the budget, this revised police budget is reduced $250,888 from the last budget that we had. So this is budget free. We've had, and this is our third budget version. So that was $244,880 in operating and $6,000 in capital. That this budget that Trevor has just presented to you is reduced from the budget we had at the May 7th meeting. So I just want to go through, we're not going through all our slides again. I'm just going to hit this very quickly, but I wanted to show you what affects then and update the effects on some of the specific properties that we talked about. So now our overall spending increase is at 13.03, or an additional $637,159 more in spending across the whole municipality from last year. That doesn't mean that the taxes go up 13.3%. We have to look at each property because there's a different effect on how each property turns out based on how much their assessment went up. So our expenses now are 15,324,611. We have 5,528,799 raised from taxation. The base rate has changed. The base rate has not changed, 3,739,436, and the area rating has changed. And I'm going to go into that in a little bit more detail. And the area rating is the 1,782,808. We still are collecting from flat rate streetlights in East Wawanosh, $6,555, and water and sewer services has no effect on the tax rate. It's fully funded by user fees. So just to elaborate a little bit on the area rate. So the area rating is made up of two different things for Wingham. They're two distinct items. There is the Wingham Police and then there's street lighting. And I went over this at the last meeting, but I want to be very, very clear on it. So I've actually added the dollars that are affected that. I gave those out last time, but I wanted to put them in the slides. So on the police budget, the total budget for police now that we have received, I just want to go over this in a bit of detail, so I don't want anyone not understanding this. So the police board budget was $1,391,603. There's building costs, as Trevor explained, that are not under the board's control of $25,837 and $32,400 in capital. So that brings the Wingham Police Board budget for Wingham just to $1,449,840. But they do have revenue that offsets that. And so they have $115,088 in grant revenue, and we use Westario money. We have every year to use some interest money to offset that as well, of $17,200. So that leaves us with an area rate net expense of Wingham Police of $1,317,552. And then the separate item that makes up that amount is Wingham Street Lighting in $109,713. For Blythe, their total area rating is $210,525. And again, they have two items distinctly that make up that amount. They have their OPP, which is $167,937, and their street lighting costs for all of Blythe at $42,588. So they have those two items that add up to that 210. And in East Wawanosh, they just have the OPP policing at $145,018. So to move on then, as we talked about last meeting, a 1% increase generates $48,916. And based on an assessment of $200,000, so that same property in each of the three wards, now we're looking at Wingham on that particular property, an increase of $277.01, Blythe $86.10, and East Wawanosh $63.43. And we're going to look at that property in a little bit more closely in a few moments. So I just wanted to go over this changes the dollars raised in each ward. And so we're looking at raising over $9 million by the time we add in the both the county and the school boards. So the changing the percentages and changing this area rated amount makes a slight difference on these percentages that we saw last time. So now we're looking at the municipal portion being 62.03%, the county 24.56%, and education at 13.41%. And then again, the corresponding dollars. So of that 62.03%, 58.48 now comes from Wingham, 17.20 from Blythe, and 24.32 from East Wawanosh. So I just wanted to go back. Last time we looked in particular at 3 Wingham properties. So I want to just look at those 3 properties again. Now with including the budget that we have from the police board. So in the last meeting, May 7th, we showed that this particular property
was going up $498.21 and would have paid $3,866.68. Now it's still going up $310.49, which works out to be about 9.2%, but it's going to be $187.72 less than the budget we had on May the 7th. But I still want to reiterate, this property would still go up $310.49. So the next property that we looked at last time, same thing. This property, May 7th, was going to go up $695.16. It's still going up $372.97, but because it's seen a very little assessment increase, it's going up about 6.27%. And so it's going to pay $322.19 less than the May 7th budget, but still going up $372.97. The next one was a commercial property that we looked at in Wingham, and again, it was going to go up $2,225.90. It's still going up $1,268.82, but that is a saving of $957.07 for this property. But still goes up $1,268.82, and that works out for this particular property at 5.14%. So we've had no changes to Blythe when we looked at this property, and we looked last time at an East Wallinosh, a farmhouse on a farm, and so again, no changes to it or to the farm property. So that particular house would still go up $71.79, but the farm, as we know, there's been quite a shift in assessment to the farmland. So for the farmland portion of that, it would go up $357.94. So what I wanted to do, just to take this one step further, was to show you the same property. If we had a property that was assessed at $200,000 this year, and it was assessed at $197,500 last year. So if that property was in each of the wards, then this year in 2018, it's going to pay $4,133.65, or a 7.18% increase, and that equates to $277.01. So that same $200,000 property in Blythe would pay $704 less, and that is $3,429.65. And you saw these last time, this property would go up $86.10, or 2.58%. And a $200,000 property house in East Wallinosh would be $3,149.84. And so it would go up $63.43, or 2.06%. So I just wanted to show you that on a comparative property, if that same property was located in each of the three wards. So you can see the difference in how much that Wingham pays more than that property if it were located in two other wards. So as I said, the rest of my, I've changed the percentages on, what has changed from the shares from the county and the school boards. And we've gone over the revised numbers for some of the particular properties that we've been following all the way through this process. So at this point, if you have any other questions, then I'd be happy to entertain them or get back to you with your answers. So what I'm looking for tonight is I do have in my report, a recommendation to pass the 2018 budget. That is also, we're looking for an exception to avoid the 3 readings and have all 3 readings completed at this meeting. And that will all come later under the bylaws section. The bylaw with this revised schedule of tax rates and the revised budget has been included under the bylaw section of the agenda. So I have my report before you. Are there any questions?
Okay, there's the printed motion in the 6.2.2. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Vauden, Deputy Reeve Campbell. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Syme.
Just to have a comment, staff have done what has been asked of them by this council, and in no way, shape, or form should the decisions of this council be representative of what staff have put on the table here. But also, it shouldn't be a representative of what has happened from the Police Services Board or the Police Association as well. So, the one thing I do think we need to councils in the future may need to consider is we need to maybe look at the way we budget things differently. And the way my suggestion is look at what the municipality, we always talk about taxes in North Huron being too high. Let's figure out what the taxes need to be comparatively to make us competitive with surrounding area and surrounding service levels and work backwards. We've talked about what priorities, what services we need or what services we don't need. We seem to not be able to change those levels of service without a significant upheaval of ratepayers or council. The question I have is, if we work backwards and we say we only have $15 million to spend, start prioritizing. By the time you get to the $15 million and you run out of money, things got to go. And I think we would all do that in our own personal finances. We need to start doing that here, and not just looking for the taxpayer to fund the difficulties of. And I understand we make decisions what our constituents want, but that's not what our oath says. Our oath says is you do the best what's in the best interest of the municipality as a whole, and that's where I think we fell down as a council in the last 3 years.
Any other further discussion? All in favor of the motion? Carried. Okay, thank you, Donna.
Thank you.
I know that you did a lot of extra work there, so thank you.
Thank you.
Moving to 6.0. I think we maybe should introduce somebody for those that might not know. Kim Stoll from the Recreation Department, and she is stepping up to the acting Recreation Director when Pat no longer visits us every day. Sort of bittersweet, knowing that this is probably your last council meeting. Thank you for 11 years of service, and thank you, Kim, for stepping into the void there. Okay. Moving to 6.3.1, the Alice Munro Festival Memorandum of Understanding. Pat.
Thank you. So the Alice Munro Festival has been operating in our municipality for some time, and they had the status of committee of council in the past. However, the inside the report, I explained that the festival has really grown beyond our borders, and for example, Saturday of this year's festival is being held in Bayfield. It's become a real Huron County gem. However, it continues to have its roots in Wingham and will always have its roots in Wingham. So staff met with Rick Sickinger, who is representing the Alice Munro Festival of the Short Story Committee, and we drafted a memorandum of understanding to explain how our municipality's interests in the festival would continue to remain while the festival continues to also grow, and also at the same time to ensure things like insurance and roles and things that each group were responsible for would be clarified. So we've created the draft memorandum of understanding for council's consideration. We've also asked that it be passed as a bylaw this evening because the new festival is coming up just this upcoming weekend, and we want, I'm sorry, I got the wrong date. What? Next weekend, sorry, 2 weekends away. And so we just want to get this off and clarified before that takes off. So I hope I don't need to go through all of the details. There's really, inside the memorandum of understanding, it clarifies how we're currently operating as well as looking forward at future of this festival. The one thing that, although this is not a committee of council, there is a recommendation that a councillor from North Huron continue to be on the board to ensure that North Huron's interests are always at the forefront of this festival, given that its roots started here with the Horticultural Society and the connection to Alice Munro that the town of Wingham has. So with that, I would like to present the memorandum of understanding. If there's any questions from council, I'd be happy to address them.
Looks like it was understood. Thank you, Pat.
That was easier than the budget.
Do I have a mover? Councillor Ritzman-Tenanga, Councillor Vauden, seconding. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? Carried. Okay, thanks, Pat. Moving to 6.3.2, the Blythe Artesian Market. Kim.
Okay, here goes my first time. Okay, the recommendation that Council of the Township of North Huron hereby accept the report regarding the Blythe Artesian Market, and further that Council approve the Blythe BIA initiative to operate the Blythe Artesian Market in Blythe as presented to Council on May the 7th. And further that Council approves the proposed interim location of the Blythe Artesian Market to the alley west of the Blythe Memorial Community Hall until the permanent proposed location on Queen Street is available. And lastly, that Council waive the fee under the licensing bylaw for 2018 and direct staff to bring back clarity under the licensing bylaw whether the event is exempt. So the summary is that the Artesian Market was initiated by the Blythe BIA. And it is designated to attract visitors to the downtown area. And in the report to council, it details the consideration to permit the market on township property and support the BIA initiative. The background is that on May the 7th, at the last council meeting, representatives of the Blythe BIA presented a proposal to council. Council directed staff to bring back a report discussing the location, the insurance, and the details for consideration. For the location, initially the Blythe BIA selected Dinsley Street as the preferred temporary location for the market. Staff communicated with the Blythe BIA that the road closure would need to be addressed in a manner consistent with the Ontario Highway Traffic Act. The cost of staff and resources from the township made this option no longer viable for the organization of the market. A second proposed location, which is the alley west of the Legion and Blythe Memorial Community Hall, be suggested as the new location, as it is not influenced on the Highway Traffic Act. This was acceptable to our staff as a safe location. Staff will work with the BIA representatives to ensure public safety and that delivery of the barricades happen. Insurance. The BIA initiative is covered under the Township of North Huron Liability Insurance. Staff are working with the organization of the market to ensure following risk management items are completed. Appropriate vendor insurance is in place, volunteer signed waiver forms, and the market acquires a North Huron license to operate. I'm going to turn it over to Pat to explain the rest.
Right, so we've added a new recommendation as of about 5 p.m. this evening regarding the BIA licensing fee. So there's just a bit of ambiguity in the licensing bylaw as to whether the BIA is or is not waived from the fee. And so when we first put the report together, we assumed it was. When we reread the licensing bylaw, we sort of said, oh, that's unclear. Ideally, what staff would like to do is come back, be directed to come back with clarity on the licensing bylaw for this year, to pass a motion to waive the fee for the licensing bylaw for this year, for this event, and also for the Wingham Farmers Market. And then we would like the opportunity as staff to come back for clarity. This is the first year the licensing bylaw has been in place, and we knew that each time it was tested with every event and activity, and every time it needed to react, we would have to turn to it for clarity. And no matter how many times you write a bylaw, you realize you've been unclear. So we are going to go back and relook at that. So that's why the change to request, or to recommend, that we waive it for this year and then revisit it for 2019. The other thing that staff were directed to do were to bring back the conditions by which the Wingham Farmers Market operates to ensure equity between the two markets. So I provided that, or Kim and Sean and I have provided that in this report. The Wingham Farmers Market is slightly different in that it operates under the Ontario Farmers Market Association. The Artisan Market does not. It's a BIA initiative. So they're a little bit two different beasts, but very similar in what they're offering the public. Under the Wingham Farmers Market, the vendors are still required to submit proof of their own insurance. They are covered under the Ontario Farmers Market insurance as an event, as a market. They're not automatically exempt under the bylaw, which I've just talked about, bringing that back for clarity. And the market pays rent weekly for the use of Crookshank Park at a rate of $31.51 plus tax weekly, as this is our rate for parks open space for anyone who rents the parks. Did you want to take over again? Sure.
So financial impact, there is no municipal financial impact. There is an in-kind support from staff of the following: delivery and pickup of the barricades, which is about 11 times over the period of time we're talking about. And future considerations, this is a proposed temporary location for the Blythe Artesian Market. The permanent location is 437 Queen Street, and that will move over there as soon as the property is available.
Okay. Councillor Knott?
I'll actually make the motion to proceed as described here, but I do have a question.
Go ahead, Councillor Knott.
My first question, I guess, to the ladies from Parks. What I didn't see in here, you're going to use the alleyway. I don't see a report or a comment from the fire department regarding the stopping up at the alley as far as a safety concern from the fire department or emergency services.
That's an excellent point, which we have not visited. We will definitely take that into consideration with the organizers, and we will touch base with the fire department. Good point.
Thank you.
Councillor Vaughn.
I have a question about the location of the artisan market. It's kind of hidden. You have to use a lot of signage, I think, to point this out to people who are passing through. And I'm wondering if the municipal parking lot was considered as an option where it would be more visible to traffic and people.
Okay, so if you're referring to the municipal parking lot west of the Scrimmager store, is that what you're talking about? Yes, that was also looked at as a possibility. They're running the markets at the same time as there's a matinee and evening show of the festival, and taking up that many parking spots is contradictory to the whole impact of what they're trying to achieve.
Hadn't thought about that.
It's my understanding that they are going to use signage and information to direct people to the alley, and they'll have musicians and things like that who will be creating a bit of noise. So hopefully that will draw the crowds there. It's not the ideal location. Ideally, they're looking to be right next to the festival in behind 437 Queen Street. This is just a temporary solution until that is available.
I just question whether the musicians would appreciate their work as being noise making.
Oh. They'll be making a festival atmosphere. Yeah, no, that's the plan, and they are working very closely with the festival. They're working closely with the BIA, the business owners. And we've also had them in contact with the Legion and the neighbors that are on that alleyway to make sure there's no conflict. But we have to look into the fire department.
That's good, thanks.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion? Carried. Moving to Public Works, 6.4.1, Blythe Wastewater Treatment Plant, 2017 Capital Works funding.
Yes, thank you, Reed Vincent. Basically, this is an administrative function, really. What we're dealing with here is, I want to use the word misalignment. Basically, our annual budget, or our annual year runs from January 1st to December 31st. The contract date on the Veolia contract ends the last day of April. So we've basically closed off all the projects that were associated with 2017 last year. Those funds have been put back to reserve. Veolia is now in the process of wrapping up their 2017 year here in May. And we're facing a number of invoices from last year, basically. So again, just an administrative function to request council to allow us to draw the funds that were in place back out of reserve, put them back into the budget so we can pay 2017 invoices as they come along. And it's important to note, A, this is probably not the last one because they're still working on their year end, but I don't want to make vendors wait while they roll the whole thing together. And B, more importantly, I've already met in our monthly meetings with Veolia to discuss this problem. We're working on considering perhaps an administrative amendment to the contract to realign the township with our year end as well.
Councillor Syed?
I'll move.
Deputy Reeve Campbell seconding. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. Okay, moving to 6.4.2, catch basin cleaning service procurement. Sean?
Thank you again, Reeve Vincent. Basically, this is something that comes across in front of council annually. Because of the dollar value that we're talking, $12,738, it triggers certain mechanisms in terms of procurement. It's for the cleaning of our catch basins. We have 645 of them within the municipality. And basically, like many of the other communities in the area, we went together with the county in a group procurement for the services. They put the tender out. You'll see the two respondents that bid came in. B. Edwards Transfer Limited came in at $19.75 a catch basin, which totals for us $12,738. Their only competitor at the time was Hurricane Hydrovac, which came in at $34.80. So you're looking at roughly a $10,000 increase if we went that route. The county's satisfied with that all the requirements were met. We used the same service provider last year as well, so we do have experience with them. And they come in, they do the job, they do it well, and they leave.
Councillor Syed moving. Deputy Reeve Campbell seconding. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. Okay, that's been going pretty good. 6.4.3, the House and Dam Report, May 22nd, 2018. Sean?
If I may read, Vincent.
Certainly.
Thank you, Regans. Reason for the relocation is we do have some technical support and assistance here tonight, but just as by means of introduction, there's a couple of things I wanted to mention to councils we get into this. If you look at the report, the staff report, there's a couple of recommendations that I would like to draw council's attention to. Specifically, first recommendation is that the report be received. Second, that staff be directed to forward a copy of this report and the corresponding attachments, which includes the KGS report as well as the other documents, to a variety of stakeholders, specifically the House and Dam Committee, Maitland Valley Conservation Authority, and the Ontario Rivers Alliance. And the third item was that a report be generated and presented to council at a later date that summarizes any, the comments of any delegations that we have come forward, as well as to include some financing details, because there's a lot of dollars that are referenced in these reports. So the request basically, or the suggested recommendation are those three things. Specifically, that allows the technical expertise to be presented to council. It gives time for groups to respond to that, and it'll allow council, because there's a tremendous, the report is massive. There's a tremendous amount of information. So basically, this is just an opportunity, if it pleases council, to bring this information forward. It's important to note that this, the package basically represents all the technical information that staff could find. I stopped at 1983. There was stuff that predated that, but you're fairly far back in history. So without any further ado, if I could, I'll introduce our technical support. That would be Fuad Curry. He's been managing this entire project for the KGS group, as well as Holly Hampton. So, Fuad.
Good evening, everybody. Presentation. It should be on. Oh. Okay. Perfect. So, yeah, thanks for having us here. My name is Fuad Curry with KGS Group, and I'm here with Holly Hampton, who's been providing peer review for a study there. And basically, what we did, I summarized that in those 4 bullets there. And it was a study that involved multiple disciplines. There was hydraulic, geotechnical, and structural analysis. So the first component there is what's known as the hazard potential classification and inflow design flood. That's basically for dams that are presented for application under the Lakes and River Improvement Act. Then for the Ministry of Natural Resources, any work that's done on a structure on water needs to go through that process. And one of the first things that they ask for is what they call the dam hazard potential classification. I'm going to explain it a little bit in the next slide. Just wanted to go through the 4 components of the study here. The second one, we did a site reconnaissance and coring of the concrete. And the third one is a dam stability analysis. I will explain that also when we get there. It's only 10 slides here. It's not going to be too long. And then as a summary of the findings, then we were asked to look at rehabilitation options and to try to scope it and provide corresponding cost. So the hazard potential classification, basically that Lakes and River Improvement Act, I just put the acronym there. And the ministry in 2011, Ministry of Natural Resources issued a number of technical bulletins and best management practices. And all I want to say there is that those are the guidelines that we're following while we conducted this analysis. So it's done by the guidelines that the ministry issued, and those are the ones that they want to see when they review these applications. So the hazard potential classification, it could be, there are 4 categories there, and just wanted to mention that when we analyzed the Huron dam, it fell on the high, what they call the high category. And basically, when you look at, when you're doing the classification of the dam under those guidelines, you look at what could happen if there was a failure of the dam. And the consequences that are analyzed are in terms of loss of life, in terms of economic damages to third parties, and then environmental and cultural assets. So when there is a risk to loss of life, the dam is going to be either in the high or very high category. And because of the location of the dam in a populated area, and the use of the dam that includes recreation downstream, the analysis that we did, which included simulations of the dam breach with a hydraulics model, indicated to us that yes, in the event of a failure, it could affect population, either recreationists down there that could be at the location downstream of the dam in a normal day, or during a flood, because the floods typically large floods could actually flood parts of the town, and then the breach of the dam on top of that will also include additional risk to population. I'm just gonna call it that. It's just a risk. In reality, none of these models is gonna be 100% certain there are gonna be loss of life. But what we're saying is that there is a potential risk. So based on that criteria, the dam was classified as high, and then the next item there is called the inflow design flood. It's basically once you apply those criteria and the requirements that are in that Lakes and River Improvement Act technical bulletins, it goes to tell you what is the flood that this dam is expected to pass as a consequence of being classified in such a way. And we concluded that it was the 100-year flood. And I must say that typically dams in the high category could actually be requiring even more larger events. But in this case, what we looked is that what would the breach of the dam do in addition to the natural flood? And applying that criteria, we concluded that the 100-year flood is an adequate inflow design flood, meaning the flood that is expected to pass based on that classification. And the other component there is used for the structural analysis, and it's what the seismic event that is also expected to be passing, and it's actually a right around frequent event is 1 in 2,500 years, so it's a low probability event. The 100-year flood is a more high probability event. So those two are the that's in a nutshell what was found when we did this analysis of the hazard potential classification of the dam. And those are elements that are going to be seen, that the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry are going to actually request when an application under Section 16 of the Act is put on. So the next item was the site reconnaissance. And just showing here, what we found in the site reconnaissance was a lot of the dam has been in a very poor state. Actually, the concrete in the dam is very deteriorated. It shows signs of freeze and thaw spalling, erosion. This is a view of what I call the overflow structure, and is a part of the structure that is actually in between piers. Okay, and I must say here that our scope was actually focused on the dam, not on the bridge itself. Although we did some observation on the bridge that we wanted to raise because they were important. We were not in our scope. There was not an analysis of the bridge itself. So this is what they call the overflow structure from upstream. There are areas in which the concrete is lost. Also, this is a photo of the overflow structure across from one pier to the next. Then in the piers themselves, there is a lot of that damage. Sections that have lost their cracks also, and also in the abutments that I'm showing here in this photo. This one from downstream, this one from upstream. So the overall condition of the concrete is very poor. We also looked at the deck, and again we found same signs, same type of damages, the lamination and a lot of cracks, and in the concrete and the deck of the bridge there was also corrosion of the reinforcement. The other element that we did, not just looking at the surface, but now drilling. This was done from the piers, from the top of the dam, from the piers down to depths of. We did 3 cores. 2 of them were to about 1.6 meters, and the other one was to 1.9 meters. And this just shows what was obtained there. For a competent concrete, you would like to see basically through your drilling long, I guess, compact sections of concrete, just maybe cutting when you make a cut to take the sample out. Right? But for the majority of the depth here, in reality, it was really there was no sample that we could take as a complete piece. And even these pieces here, they have, zooming in, you can see a number of cracks there. So we really couldn't get any samples that there was just one, the biggest portion there, but we concluded that just this one would not be representative of the whole structure when the majority of it is as you're seeing there, right? So really, the concrete in the piers, it's lost a lot of its binding capacity, and it's actually its integrity is into question. Now, one clarification I need to make. Unfortunately, we wanted to do coring also on that structure I was showing you, the overflowing structure. But at the time that we did this coring in January, it was too slippery. There was ice there. We could not really get there because we wanted to see not just the concrete on the piers, but also on the structure, on the overflow structure, what I call the overflow structure there. And that's going to be very important for what our recommendations and what can be done there. But if the concrete in that structure is also like this, then it's gonna then the options there are gonna be very limited. Gonna get there in the next slide there. So just summarizing this site reconnaissance, I already mentioned that that falling, erosion, delamination was observed. This deterioration in the concrete actually indicates that the capacity of carrying loads and also of containing water is actually compromised. And because we didn't do the weirs, the overflow structure, we couldn't see underneath as well. Well, it was a safety concern. We couldn't actually get there. But we know that in the past, in reports, and we know that sheet piling had been used for treating some undermining problems that occurred there through the history of the structure. And the last bullet there, which is something that even though it was not our scope, we considered it was important to highlight to the town that the condition of that bridge actually may pose a risk. And even though it's not being used for traffic, we were actually recommending to addressing that safety before allowing even pedestrian use. And that was something that we already reported and it's being acted on. So then the dam stability analysis. So I said that this is the third bullet of that first slide. And in this stability analysis, all we're looking at is how stable is a structure based on the different forces that are upon them. We're assuming for this analysis that the concrete is competent, even though we don't think so, but even though the previous observations already indicate that that's into question. But even if the concrete was competent, now what we want to see is if the structure is stable to the different loads that are put there. Now, the load conditions that are used for this analysis are the ones, again, in those technical bulletins from the Lake Superior Improvement Act. Some of them are normal conditions, and some of them are actually extreme conditions. But those are, as for instance, the earthquake that I mentioned in one of the initial slides. That's what the guidelines are required to be considered for the dam to actually be deemed stable under those requirements. And the analysis was done with the dam, with and without the bridge. That was one of the parts of the requirement to evaluate whether in an option in which the bridge is removed, if the dam would still be stable. But what we found is that regardless, with the weight of the bridge or without it, that does not meet the stability criteria. And that's even if the concrete was competent. So it would need remedial work to be actually approved under Section 16 of the Lake River Improvement Act. But once it goes into the process with the ministry, they would like to see the remedial work to actually approve anything done in this dam. So what options we consider then? We look at the do nothing. We always look at that, but in this case, because it doesn't meet the standards, imposes a risk. That's not a feasible option. We leave it just the way it is. Recommissioning, that's an option. It does require studies, approvals. It requires an environmental assessment process. The commission the dam is also a process that has to fulfill both the requirements in the Ministry of Natural Resources guidelines, and also needs to be approved with the public. And there was already an environmental assessment underway, and in that assessment, from what we've seen, the limited information that we know about it is that the community actually wanted to keep the dam. So that's something that we need to be considered for this option of decommissioning, if that's to be adopted. And it also would have some cost, and we did an estimate of the different options. And it's actually what we call a class 4 estimate. So it's just at this level of analysis. It's just based on other approaches that we've done and typical cost, but it doesn't include any design, of course, because we're in a very preliminary stage. But it gives you an idea of whether, and it could be either 50% more or even or 30% less. But those are the estimates done with all the components. Now, this cost is construction cost, or actually in this case, demolition cost for the decommissioning. There might be other costs in a decommissioning scenario to take into account some remedial environmental aspects of the shore or shorelines or any other considerations that come out during that process that become evident. Anyways, that is the decommissioning option. Then we looked at rehabilitation. Now, the important thing about the rehabilitation is that feasibility of the rehabilitation depends on actually the condition of the concrete core. If it is similar to what we saw on the piers, then these options are not really feasible. And the other component of that rehabilitation alternative was that in all them, we were including removal of the bridge deck. So that's including the cost, and it will be a requirement even to carry out the rehabilitation. You cannot carry out rehabilitation with the condition of that bridge on top, so it would be a necessary step there. And we looked at two options. One is installing post-tension anchors. So basically, it would be if, for instance, the overflow structure is the condition of the concrete, the overflow structure, it's suitable beyond a depth of half a meter. So if you only need to remove about half a meter of that, and then you find same as lost concrete, then this post-tension anchor is an option. You will need to again install some structural anchors there down to the foundation, and then add the concrete that was removed and some additional concrete, and it would have a cost of under $3 million, $2,869,000. Again, it's a class 4 cost with those configurations that I already indicated. The other option for rehabilitation is adding mass. And what it does is that because the dam, the way it is, we said that it's not stable. So if it's made bigger by adding mass, making it, I would think, mostly longer, then it would such that it could be stable. And that's another option, but it's a more expensive option from the post-tension anchors. So among those, the post-tension anchors seem to be the more attractive. But again, adding mass or post-tension anchoring will require the concrete beyond half a meter or so from the surface to be competent. We haven't, and we couldn't actually test the concrete there. If it is in the same condition as the one that we found in the piers, we start removing that first half a meter. We end up actually removing most of the dam itself, so it pretty much becomes now a replacement of the dam. So those that are the rehabilitation options. They cannot be fully discounted until, for instance, an analysis is done on those tests on those overflow structure. But yeah, I mean, it's looking at what we found in the other parts of the concrete is it's very likely that option is not going to be feasible. So then we would end up with the replacement option. In the replacement option, we also looked at two potential alternatives there. And it's, we wanted to see if there was a more economical alternative. The first one is a concrete overflow structure. It's something similar to what's there now. Basically, across the width of the river is another concrete overflow, another weir there, but actually new concrete there. And that actually would be the most expensive of the two options. It's more than $6 million. And so we looked at another option in which instead of trying to replace the overall, the whole structural concrete, you would put an earth embankment and then add another sluiceway, which is similar to this to the newer structure that is on the north section of the dam. You will need that because we need to pass again this IDF, which the dam, the way it is now, will pass only, but counting on overflowing over the overflow structure. If we put an earth embankment, then then we cannot overflow that earth embankment. We have to have an additional spillway there. And the cost of that option is just under $4 million. So, for instance, you can see here that the added mass option is actually end up costing almost as doing a new dam there. But if the post-tension anchors turn out to be feasible, still it will be cheaper than the earth embankment. And that was one of the reasons we wanted to put this cost there. See, comparatively, if there was any merit on even looking at further into rehabilitation options. So that's that was the fourth component of the study, and here I'm just summarizing what we already said. The HPC is high, and the dam, the way it is now, theoretically can pass the IDF, meaning that the structure has the spilling capacity sufficient to pass that 100-year flood that I mentioned, using the structure that is in the north part, this looseway structure, and allowing overtopping over the concrete structure. Provided that two things, provided that the dam is stable, and provided that you can actually operate those looseways quickly, which is another element to take into consideration for the future of this dam. One of the things in the option that I mentioned before of the earth embankment, there was a winch, there was a cost of a winch considered to actually also to allow quick operation of that sluiceway. So the concrete condition is very poor, and it could mean that the integrity of the concrete in the dam is not reliable. It doesn't meet the stability based on its size and the forces that would act upon it, as required in the Lakes and River Improvement Act, technical bulletins. So the do nothing is not a feasible option. It cannot be left the way it is. The decommissioning, we said, will require additional studies, will require an approval process, getting the community on board, and just for comparables, the cost of the demolition was estimated less than $500,000, $436,000. But these are costs with an accuracy of between 50% higher, 30% lower, so it could be again in that range. The rehabilitation options might not be feasible, but need to confirm the condition of the concrete in the overflow structure. And just for comparison, the cost of the two options that we looked at were in between less than $3 million and about $4.5 million there. And then the replacement options, we looked at two options again, and costs were between $3,960,000 and $6,209,000. The one element to clarify is that the study was focused only on the south component of the dam. It was a request that the north dam, this structure is the newer one, it's been operated there, was not included in the cost. Whether or not there is a need to do something with that part, it was not analyzed, and then it was not part of the scope. And then the bridge might not be safe for public use, and it's something that should be addressed. So that is yes.
Questions or comments? Deputy.
The fact that we're having more and higher floods all the time and more frequent, the more times they hit this dam is probably not going to help it any as far as deterioration.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, the deterioration of the damage is gonna progress. The issue of the change in the frequency and the intensity of the floods that we're seeing, well, again, yeah, there are different theories there. There's different considerations there. It's been seen, and it is the impression that we're seeing more frequent events and higher intensity. And yes, it cannot be denied that that the presence of the dam stays there is a concern.
Just wondering, the deterioration is more related to frost freeze damage than the flooding. It's two different issues that are going on there.
Yeah, the effect that it would have would be one of the low cases there. It's not to say, and that's actually a good clarification there. It's not to say that the more floods are gonna necessarily increase the rate of deterioration, but it's a phenomenon that is progressing and it's actually it's not gonna get better. Does it answer the question?
Go ahead.
Just one more question. We had two last winter that had floods, and there was a lot of debris came down the rivers. There's dams above this one that was hit. A lot of damage done.
Yeah.
Which stopped a lot of debris from coming down and probably hitting this one. The debris coming down was getting to be larger trees and more ice and these kind of things, which won't help it any as far as the dam goes either.
Yeah, actually, there was a failure of a dam upstream. Was it? No.
Corey Dam.
That there was an earthen sluiceway that let go, or else there might have been a lot more damage. It was designed as a relief valve, and that surprisingly, it worked exactly the way it was supposed to.
At the housing dam or at the at the upstream dam? Okay, yeah. It is something that will need to be considered with any of these options, because one thing is to say that it has the capacity to pass a flood, but then it might be all you might not be able to utilize that capacity if you have blockage by debris. So certainly it's something that in the next stage of analysis, whether a solution is to say rebuild the dam or even rehabilitation, we need to be considering the management of debris. Yeah, that could be a concern there, for sure. So certainly, for instance, the overflow spillway, of course, among the two options, the more expensive option is just an overflow structure. That one, you could think that, well, it will let everything pass. The earth embankment, on the other hand, will rely on the limited width of the two structures. So certainly, at that point, you will need to take that into consideration and potentially, based on previous events, make a qualification of that risk and include it in the criteria for the selection of the option.
We've had 3 major floods since June 23rd of last year, and they've all pretty well hit this river out here. There's 2 rivers that come down through.
Yeah.
This one has taken the brunt of it since June 23 of last year.
Yeah, no, there was an option. There was, and I don't remember the year exactly, but it was close to. And at that year, that's why I mentioned that in that year, the sluiceway could not be opened on time. So if the option, for instance, is, I'm just going ahead, but this is only a preliminary stage, but at that time you need to analyze that if the option is the earth embankment with the structure, you will need to make provisions to ensure that you can operate that on time, either with a different way to opening maybe a winch system, and then considering also what you just mentioned there, the possibility of being blocked by debris, and what would be then your plan to mitigate that, or to, yeah, for sure. You would have to have a consideration of an emergency method, emergency procedure there to clear that those openings there.
Councillor Knott.
I have to confess, about 6 weeks ago, my curiosity got the best of me, and I actually went down and I walked that dam. And I had never been that close to it before, but I got down and walked and took a look at it. I'm not a construction guy, but I'll tell you, it scared the hell out of me. And I understand that bridge has to come down for sure. That's a definite based on, and I know you guys didn't study that, but I was surprised at how much exposed rebar there was and the extent of the corrosion under there. So I see that we have no hope of really rehabilitating that bridge for a pedestrian walkway or anything else. So now what we're faced with is you're just going to have a dam. You're no longer going to have a walkway, pedestrian walkway across there. The other thing and I know you touched on it here, that really all you are looking at is the south dam portion. So the north dam portion, although it's newer and everything, still looked like it had some structural deficiencies that probably needed to be repaired. And the other thing that struck me was when I looked at the weir boards, getting them in and out is an issue. So if that was going to be your relief valve for an earth embankment with a sluiceway, you're going to have to spend money on that as well. So that's all in addition to these costs that you've presented here. You've got nothing in here for any north dam, right?
No, it was the new structure that was considered. It would be almost the same. It would be almost having two of those, and for that one, we included a winch. That's a winch option there. So yeah, you would need to include that for north dam, and potentially if because in this study we were instructed in the request for proposal not to look at this north dam stability, but at least you would need the supports and the winches and the stop blocks are okay. It might not be that expensive. It's just the winches, but it depends on how it is there, because it might be just might be less than $100,000 that part. But the other component where the structure of that north dam needs something more, you will need to check it, and it was not part of this.
Good.
Sean, do you have anything further? Or?
Yes, thanks, Reed. Thank you, Reed. Just to wrap it up, basically, I think now it can be said that we have good information surrounding the Huron Dam, its rating, its state, its condition, the options. I think Rod was very clear with what KGS determined the options to be. If it's the desire of council and the recommendations are approved, basically, I expect we'll hear from delegations looking at different perspectives. The only thing I might suggest or ask is that we consider when council's hearing any delegation or looking at anything pertaining to the dam, we look at a couple of things. We look at the environmental impacts. I mean, dams impact environment. So, that's something that council has to consider as they're going through these things. There's very distinct social considerations surrounding the house and dam. It's an integral part of the community. So that's another, that lends a fair bit of emphasis to and volume to the consideration, I suppose. And then finally, and without belaboring or stating the obvious, the financial implications are also noteworthy, and that's why you'll see again in the recommendations, should it be the desired council, I would bring some sort of a breakdown of what these numbers actually look like, in real terms. It wouldn't be burrowing into the actual estimates, but using these numbers, what does that look like for the community? What does that look like on an annual basis, that sort of thing. So just again, I wanted to thank KGS Group. I was quite happy with the information that they were able to give me, and I think it was a good exercise for me personally. The last thing I wanted to do, because I know we've belabored this, is although the bridge over the dam is closed to pedestrian traffic at this time, in consultation with KGS, they've assured us that there should be no issue with putting the stop logs in. Again, that's a different type of stress. So to say that we had to keep them out might be a little bit of overkill. So the intention of Public Works is now that we would move forward with the usual seasonal routine. We'll put the stop logs back in, bring the levels up to the spring, summer, and fall levels, and then we can carry on with the usual operation come the late fall.
Pardon me, council, but should there be some way of lifting them integrated if we're putting them back in? It was the 23rd of June. The water was coming up too fast to get to being able to remove them.
Perhaps Fuad can support this, but I don't believe that there's any quick fix in terms of a lifting mechanism. My understanding, I guess of course it predated my arrival, but my understanding was by the time the flood waters hit, it was too late to actually pull those things because it is a very mechanical process right now.
Yeah.
Very labor intensive, but water, unless there's something that we're missing that could be.
No, I think, the concern is actually how quickly you can take them out and last time I think it was not quick enough. I think, again, we didn't look at that structure in detail. Understanding was that it would take half a day or more than a day to take them out. So that now the question is about forecasting and how quickly can you anticipate this event. I think, look, based on history, maybe just wouldn't think and as a question, but Mr. Campbell was saying, these events are becoming more unpredictable. So I mean, it's a tough question to ask. To answer.
Because we have already do well at letting us know the water levels and how quick they're rising. They have rain gauges all down the river, but there's times there's more than what they can actually get out and get going.
Yeah, it has to do also with the Conservation Authority and whether they can, their ability to give you enough warning time. Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult because it takes into the prediction of what the weather is going to be like, and the fact that it might not. You might, on the other hand, might not even have a flood anymore this year. But it's it is a judgment call there. It depends on how quickly you can react to that. Now, and again, the other thing to consider is what is the purpose of putting it back, and if it's worthwhile. I think it's kind of balancing a different.
Okay, thank you. Bill?
No more questions. I'll make the motion as outlined here. We accept that and proceed.
Proceed with the printed motion.
Yep.
Councillor Syke seconding. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried. Okay, thank you. Okay. Moving to 6.6.1, drainage superintendent report, Scott, municipal drain. Kirk, please.
Good evening, council. I've invited one individual to attend with this report tonight. That is Jeff King, Stewardship Services Coordinator with Mainland Valley Conservation Authority. So I'll briefly go through my report for council, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jeff to give you a bit of history and background on the entire project before you consider my recommendation. So the report before council tonight is on the Scott Municipal Drain. A little bit of background: on March 9th, the clerk received 2 notices for drain improvement for the Scott Municipal Drain. And this was received by North Huron Council as well on the council meeting for March 19th. And at that time, they instructed the clerk for Township of North Huron to notify the Conservation Authority, OMAFRA, as well as both parties have requested the improvement to the drain. I've also provided Section 78 of the Drainage Act for council. And at this point here, we're actually in the process of, we've given the Conservation Authority and OMAFRA 30 days notice. We're at the point now where council can appoint an engineer. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jeff. Jeff's put together a very nice PowerPoint presentation. So sit back, relax, listen to the birds, the water flow through the channel.
Okay, thanks very much, Kirk. And yeah, it's a fairly brief presentation, and I can run through it fairly quickly. I don't know how many have seen Scott Municipal Drain. I've been involved in it for
let me get the right one up.
Quite a number of years.
I
wish we could.
Yeah. Did you bring the scale?
What's that?
There we go.
Okay, so I'll run through it fairly quick with you here. So it is a Scott Municipal Drain. We did have you had the Section 78 request come in. And so this is a Scott drain here. The red is the watershed boundary of it. And in the Scott Municipal Drain, there's a section of closed drain into the open ditch, and then it goes down into the Belgrave Creek and then down into our Maitland River. So it's a smaller municipal drain, about 400 acres, and there's approximately about 8 landowners on that drain. And this picture, I took that with Murray Scott back in 2005. There's a date on it. And Murray was concerned with the ongoing maintenance. It needed clean out all the time, a lot of erosion. The closed tile at the top end was obstructed. So it was kind of interesting working with Murray. I learned a lot that we talked about, why don't we look at more the cause of the issue instead of the symptom of doing another clean out and ongoing maintenance. And this is the first project where we ever started to incorporate what we call rural stormwater management. As you're aware, it's done in the urban areas, but not done very often in rural areas. So some of the projects we did, this is one of the constructed wetlands that went in. We used control boxes on these. There's 6 of these wetlands that went in to hold back water, purify it, and go back into the shallow groundwater. And that's what it looked like 10 years later. We put in on the municipal drain the closed 14-inch tile. What we developed was a diversion box. So under low flow conditions, we could take water out into the wetlands instead of going straight into the open ditch. So that's how that box would work. Under normal flows, it would flow out here into the wetlands. If we got a high flow, it would overtop into the open ditch. And that's what it looked like under an event. All the sediment would go into a wetland. It would filter there, help take the nutrients out, and recharge the aquifer. So when we get into drier conditions, and then shortly afterwards, that's what it looks like. It filters it out, becomes clean, and then all the other benefits, for wildlife too, that Murray said he's seen over the years with the development of that. All the direct tile connections there's no direct connection into the municipal drains anymore, so they all enter into the wetlands. So Murray had all these barn roofs and a lot of yard water coming off. So that tile, we diverted it into the wetland area here. And these are the control boxes, the agri control boxes that we used in the wetlands, because we wanted to make sure that if we had a major event, we'd have enough capacity in there to hold the water, especially in a winter melt like we had this winter. And we actually used a control box. Murray sold some land, and a new landowner bought it and wanted to systematically tile it. So we used a control box actually to hold water back into the tile and kept the nutrients of water there for the plants to use. This is a diversion berm that was built. A lot of water coming off that land into the open ditch that was over here. And the red arrow is showing my vehicle there, so it gives you a real good perspective in 2008 how much water we could hold back instead of going right into the open ditch. And it was the first time we tried a different approach to a clean out. We did what we called a modified drain clean out. So again, there's so much sediment in there, we could see the natural meanders, so we flagged it off. And then we went in and dug out the bank where we had, there's a lot of shallow groundwater feeding into this. It's a good cold water system. So we put the gravel in, and then we took sods off the bank and put it on top of the gravel. And again, a lot of our municipal drains, this is what a typical drain looks like, and that's the Scott drain. It gets too wide with clean outs, it slows down, the sediment builds up. And that's what it looks like now. We pinch the channel in using that method you just saw. And that's the same day what it looked like. You can see my flags where we put in the meanders. The sods, there's a couple big chunks of sods. We took that right off the bank. And I think what's best about this, it's natural channel design. Now it's self-cleaning, better fish habitat. Murray said at one time there was brook trout in here. When DFO came out, we couldn't find any brook trout. And now the brook trout are back into this system already. Improved drainage, the outlet's not obstructed anymore, a reduced cost of maintenance, and improved water quality. So really it's a win-win for everybody, using that approach. And that's what it looks like today. There's no sediment in the bottom of the drain, and that's ideal brook trout spawning habitat as well. There was 2 fish hatcheries there, and we took them offline, and we filled it with wood chips. So some of the systematic tiling, we worked with the University of Waterloo. The wood chips will denitrify the water coming out of it, and worked very well in the project. So some new technology there. And a number of grass waterways were installed as part of that project as well. And this is the channel work we did working with Perry's Geomorphic. So it's a different approach to it with meanders, pools and riffles that help dissipate the energy and improve water quality, and especially good for fisheries. So a lot of plantings were done along the drain. So this is a picture taken from a drone during a major event that we had in 2016. So we just looked at all these. I'll just explain it to you how it's working here. So this is systematically tiled. With that control box, we dumped water into our upper wetland storage area. It maxed out and filled up, and it dumped into constructed wetland we developed over here. It maxed out and dumped into the wetland that we used in the bush, and then traveled down through the grass waterway into the open ditch. The barn roof water and that dumped into this wetland, and surface water came into here as well. And then this is a very steep slope, and all this used to run right to the drain. So you can see how much water we stopped there too in this diversion berm, and then it goes down into another wetland there. And in this event, there was too much water, so some of it came around the grass waterway and fed into the top end. So interesting, water that would come in at the bottom end, we actually fed it back up to the top end. So the beauty of this, if you look at the channel, hard to see it there, but again, it remained in base flow conditions. So this is a picture I took when we started the project at the Scotts. On the right, you can see a high flow event, how much sediment's there, how much nutrients in there, erosion, ongoing cleanouts. And this is what it looks like today. 2012, one of our driest on records when the Maitland River dried, a lot of our trout streams dried. This is what it still looked like. We maintained base flow. And in 2013, and even this winter when we had those major events, that's still what it looked like. It maintained base flow and it ran clear. So really a win-win, and that's really what I'm trying to get across with the rural stormwater management. 2005, it's 13 years later. With Murray there, we did all kinds of tours. Hundreds of people have visited the site, and a lot of different agencies too have looked at what we've been doing. So just to summarize, we did have a Section 78 request. The only thing that really was left to do is some open channel improvements, 90 meters at the bottom end. And then it was always Murray's wish to protect what he's done here over the years. A lot of money has gone into this project. OMAFRA, Sid Vanderbeek is quite open to some of the work that we are doing there. So we like to try to incorporate that work into the Drainage Act. So we did work with R.J. Burnside, Jeff Dixon, and Chris Cole, fisheries biologists, with them to come up with a cost to do this. $15,000 for the engineering for the channel, the restoration of the channel, 25. Planting the buffers, signage, engineering of the project, $50,000. So it's a $94,000 project. And Jeff did talk to OMAFRA, and it is work that's already been done, but Sid said it would still be eligible for the 1/3 grant for any ag lands. And the challenge we've had for many years is trying to find some funding to make this happen, but we were successful in getting the Bruce Power funding. So we do have $67,600 in our account now that could go to that project. So we do have the funding to make it happen. So there's a picture of Murray and Wilma. They did win the Minister's Award for Environmental Excellence on the Scott Municipal Drain. And again, as I mentioned, it was always his wish to see that project protected for the future.
Just one comment. This will put the water into the Belgrade Creek.
Yes.
So this is the last stretch to go to the Belgrade Creek.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll make a motion. Go ahead and do it.
To support this recommendation.
Yes.
Councillor Knott seconding. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion? Carried.
There isn't many of these kind of projects going on anywhere in Ontario. That we have one up by the lake now, but this is one of the very important ones. A lot of people can see this.
Well, thank you, Jeff, for attending and waiting at the evening.
Thanks for letting me attend.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen. Moving to 7.1, notice of a proposed road closure in Norris Turnberg. Richard?
Yes, so this piece of correspondence is regarding a proposed portion of a road closure in Morris Turnberry. So it's west of Wigham, and if council has reviewed that and you have no concerns, there's a draft motion there indicating that there are no concerns and that could be forwarded to Morris Turnberry.
Make that a motion.
Deputy Reeve and Councillor Ritzman-Tenenga, all in favor? Carried. Okay, that one's good. 7.2, request to formally proclaim June 2nd, 2018 as National Health and Fitness Day in the Township of North Huron. Councillor Sype, Councillor Vauden, any discussion? All in favor? Carried. The 7.3 elementary school fair request for a letter of support. That's to obtain grants from two funding organizations, Ray and Jim. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. OGRA invitation to preferred autonomous vehicle test corridor.
I'm going to make the motion so we can question.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Okay. We're open for discussion now.
Okay. So what I'm gathering from what I read through is that what they're looking for is for us to agree to allow them to do their autonomous vehicle testing in the municipality, and we get to choose the route they can use. I don't know if anybody, I don't know what department, is it Works Department, would that be?
Oh, yes.
Who we toss
It'd be
into?
Sean again.
So which route should we allow them to crash on, since there was just another crash there in the States again with one of their ones?
425.
Wouldn't do 425.
Up north, going up by Perry Sound, and where they have tried different types of pavement. It'll probably go for 5 or 6 miles, that they do all these different types of pavement. And there's signs to say, this is a certain thing, and this is a certain thing as you go through. Before you get to Perry Sound, go have a look at it. Take a day off.
Basically, I'd like to see from the Zetland corner down Scott Line, along the curves along the river there, and in the middle of the block, there's that 66-foot offset.
Maybe they can pave it too, right?
Yeah, if they pay for paving it, it'd be great.
So I guess my question is, are there any concerns from any of the involved departments with regard to agreeing to this? I mean, I think it's actually not a bad, overall, it's probably a good idea that they do some serious testing of these vehicles. And I think that the premise behind the request from Good Roads is a good one. Maintain technology in the country. So,
Councilor Sutton.
The only concern that I have is from a public safety perspective, is how do we let the public know when or if there's going to be something driving in the area that, like, you gotta at least advise them of something. Somebody's gonna have a meltdown, probably. The idea, I don't know. That's from a public safety perspective. That's where I would be struggling with it. That, you know, be extra vigilant on the road because there might be a car that's not having anybody drive it. Like, that's the part I'm struggling with this regards to this ask. That's
Sean.
In all fairness, before I would suggest anything to council, I would need to know a little more about this. Was my concern as I looked at it, just as a very precursory sense, is that it's a busy community, it's a busy township, and I would need to know a little bit more about what safeguards are in place and how the system works. I don't know enough about it.
Then I would suggest you do some cursory checking into for more information. It's not that you have to spend a lot of time digging out reports, but
bless you.
Councilor Knott.
I guess we could just make a little addendum to this, because what we've done here is that, you know, we're saying we're willing to participate, but referring the Director of Public Works to come up with a list of preferred routes, but also maybe to give us further information. So just an addendum to the motion.
Good seconder? Yes. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried. Okay. The 7.5 and 7.6 somewhat similar. What is council's decision? Donna, do you want to speak to it briefly?
Sure. So this was a little program that has evolved over the years. Back in the beginning, before their schools amalgamated and such, that these were $50 bursaries given to the most improved student, and we directed them to be like a North Huron student. Now that in the population and the schools are combined, what we're getting is more of a request to support like the graduation ceremony. That's actually what Abby Medill is asking for, and Sacred Heart is still looking for a bursary, which we had in the past been specifying that it was only to go to a North Huron student. So And then, as I said, we haven't received one from Hullet at this point. So in total, that was 3 bursaries at $50 each for $150, and we haven't included that in the budget for this year. But I'm not sure if it's a practice. We wanted to bring it to council to see if you want to continue supporting this practice now that the variations, there's a little bit varied use of the funds rather than always the most improved student. So I just wanted to bring it to council's attention and see if you are interested, or if you would like to discontinue, or put any stipulations on it if you choose to continue with the program.
Deputy Reeve Campbell.
I think it's important to recognize our grade 8 kids are going on into high school here. That's what this is.
It's for grade 8 graduation.
Grade 8 graduation, so we have, just to recognize some of those kids in our municipality who have achieved something. And hopefully they go on and they can do better things still.
Would you rather, though some of them want to use it for the dinner and things like that, rather than the student bursary?
The time I did it for Sacred Hearts, the student was presented with a bursary of $50. And I think it's important to give it to the student.
Well, that was the most improved, and that Sacred Heart has always had it the most improved. Councillor Syke next.
I actually would prefer it to be a North Huron student. The process of, we want to enjoy or promote onward education and success within there. I think it's important that we do that, but I also enjoy the fact that we do put that caveat that it is a North Huron resident. Obviously, we want to make sure that therefore the money stays within our own municipal funding. So that's what I would hope. I think the program, the way we had it before, is better fitted to us than it is just the overall. I would rather see it be $50 for each, going to a North Huron resident, as it was in the budget and what we've done in the past.
Okay, we've done that with Sacred Heart. The Effie McDill.
They're asking for something different than what we've done in the
They're asking
past.
for it different. Councillor Ritzman.
I was gonna say, I don't think that we should be using the monies to help fund the party for the grade 8s. But to put it in towards a bursary for most improved, I think that's fine. However, again, that comes out of that donation pot, right? Or is it something separate?
Yeah, it's in a miscellaneous.
Discretionary fund.
Discretionary fund. I mean, I think it's, I guess, good to recognize most improved students, but in the same breath, we really shouldn't be using taxpayer dollars to do that.
I'm just gonna comment, having 2 children that have graduated in grade 8 from Effie McDill. That's my understanding, they don't do awards, individual awards for the children, and that is why the request is different. I'm just giving you some background that I'm aware of, and that may be why they're not saying it's a bursary for a student, it's towards something the whole group will enjoy. But you could look further into that or ask the principal that. That's my understanding.
That's exactly how it is. Pat.
Yeah, so I didn't know if anybody knew that.
So the 7.5, the request for support of the bursary from Sacred Heart. Trevor. Deputy Reeve Campbell, seconded. Councillor Howell.
I don't think we should restrict it just to North Huron people. These kids are coming in from other areas, but they're getting schooling within our municipality. I don't know how you could say a kid from Teeswater couldn't gather a kid from,
Well,
across the road out here in Turnberry couldn't have. That's not right.
basically, their council has the same opportunity to provide a bursary.
That's right. So we should set the example.
And they do. Turnberry did.
Further discussion, if any.
I'll just side with, let's do it for a North Huron student. That would be
Okay.
my thing, because we do know at least one other municipality that's doing the same thing for their students, so.
All those in favor of the motion? Carried. Okay, 7.6. Is there any motion for the request for the general support of the banquet? I take that to be in the negative. And 7.7, I believe we answered the question on Williams Farmers Market and the possible waiving the license fee earlier in the meeting, so we can skip over that.
I don't think it was actually in that motion. We can reread the motion, Richard, but I think we talked about coming back for analysis, but I'm not sure if that specific fee waiving was in the motion.
No, that's correct. We just talked about waiving the fee specifically for the Blythe market and analyzing both.
Okay, Councillor Singh.
So I will make the motion to waive the fee for the Wing.
For this
For
year,
the Wing Farmers Market and come back as similar request from the Blythe Fusion Market.
and seconded by Councillor Knott.
For discussion purposes, yes, because actually they're asking us to waive the rental. If I can read this writing, they're asking for waiving not of the fee, but of the rental for the.
No, they
For
pay
the
the rent and they're willing to do that.
They want to
That's
keep
not-
paying the rent?
They will continue to pay the rent. They're asking for the licensing fee to be waived.
For the licensing fee. Okay, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, we ready? All in favor of the motion? Carried. Okay, Reeves activity. I had 2 hours of very enjoyable conversation today. At 10:30, I had one of the grade 10 civics class here for educational day on lower tier council and what we do, what we're in charge of. Thank you, Donna, for the sheets that you did extra photocopying for me. And I found last year and this year, the students are far more in tune with it, whether it's they know it's an election year and they're paying more attention, but there was good, honest questions of interest from them. And also at 2 o'clock, there was the second class in for an hour. And I actually enjoyed it quite a bit. Because the thing of it is, the more they can know about our municipal councils, and I did mention the bubble on the ceiling at the back is the camera for televising our council meeting, and that so that I'm not sure, but I think some of them might have tuned in tonight for part of the council meeting, just to see what was going on. Basically, I will let it rest at that point. For my comments, council members, is there any verbal comments from boards or committees that you represent? Everything coming good with Alice Monroe?
Everything's coming together nicely. Most
that you know about.
That I know of. Ticket sales are really high this year, so that's great. There's very few spaces left for some of the events. That's really good. As in past years, it hasn't been quite as full, so we're looking forward to that. And then just on another note, which is somewhat unrelated to any kind of committee thing, I received an email last week from a Wingham ratepayer who just wanted to pass along some compliments to facilities and rec and public works on the excellent job that their staff is doing in keeping the town looking so beautiful. So I just wanted to pass that along and pass it along to your staff as well, please.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else? Okay, moving to 8.3.1. Councillor Sipe had put this request together? Do you want to elaborate now or just go to discussion on it?
So this is the follow-up to the Blythe and Wingham downtown corridor snow removal. So I brought it back up for clarification because I think it was, I think it's a good idea, but we gotta do it as a municipality, not just each ward.
Councillor Vaughn,
I'll second the motion.
seconded. Further discussion, Councillor Ritzman-Tinga.
So just, speaking on behalf of the Wingham BIA, the shop owners in the downtown core are very pleased with their snow removal. They feel that the Public Works does an excellent job and are quite happy with the way things are at present. I just wanted to share that as part of the information when you're looking at doing this report, that the downtown businesses in Wingham are very pleased.
Okay, thank you. Further discussion. Well, if there's no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion? Carried. 8.3.2, also from Councillor Sight, and it's a request for a report regarding North Huron policing. Do you want to elaborate?
Based on the motion that was made by Councillor Knott during the budget deliberations and the discussion that the policing discussion is going to be opened, I would defer that this motion, notice of motion, be inclusive of the staff report that is as part of that report that comes to council.
Okay.
Clarify, are you amending this then?
So what I'm saying is this was an alternative. What I'm saying is the report that the motion that you opened was staff to bring back what the other alternatives are.
Yep.
Right? This is an alternative. So what I'm saying is this should be part of that report, and therefore this is deferred until that report comes up and then discussion can happen again.
So you want to defer it?
Correct. That's
Correct.
basically
Okay.
what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Deputy Reeve.
I think from previous conversations that we've had, that East Walnosh is quite happy with what they have for policing. And I think maybe Blythe is exactly the same way. I've heard from a few Blythe. And I think we just leave well enough alone as it is right now.
Councillor Sight.
I understand that ratepayers don't like change. I get it. And I'm not suggesting that, what I'm suggesting in this particular issue, in this alternative, is the Township of North Huron has a police service. We pay for that. Wingham Ward pays for it right now. We have the service within the municipality. We, as a municipality, the wards of Blythe and East Wawanosh, pay for a service that goes outside of the municipality. When we have the service available to us here, East Wawanosh and Blythe can get that same service potentially from the North Huron Police Service. Why I'm saying is, what I've always said is, we are required to do what's in the best interest of North Huron as a whole. And I've always said this, and I will continue to say it. If the ratepayers of Blythe and East Wawanosh wanted to build a $30 million arena in Belgrave, would we do it? No, we wouldn't. So if we have a service that we're having here that we can provide for the entire municipality at a reasonable cost and no different, why wouldn't we? That's the question I'm asking. That's what this is. And all I'm asking is to defer it based on the conversation that we're opening the discussion about whether it's OPP or not or what. I don't care. At the end of the day, council needs to decide, and my opinion will be no, regardless of what it is. But that's the delay I have. Is it, we have the service. We can offer it. Why does the ratepayers of those wards not want to utilize it?
Councillor Richmond Dominguez.
I think it's just a matter of looking at some alternatives to policing and seeing if there is a better option for East Wawanosh and why expanding wing police doesn't necessarily mean that your rates are going to go up or anything like that. Like Trevor said, it's just looking at some of the alternatives, looking at all the options that we have available to us and seeing what's going to happen. And maybe we just need to have a bit of open-mindedness and look beyond at what we could do to be better.
Deputy Reeve?
I'm not sure that the Wingham Police Service can give two different services. One is a drive-through service, and one is a 5.1 here in Wingham. Chief Poole has told me that they can't do that. We have to have the same police service as you guys do, and we don't need that in life. And I think we're wasting Chief Poole's time. I think he has better things to do than to touch this. That's my opinion.
Councillor Knott?
I think we can end the discussion at this point in time because we're already deferring this and we're going back to look at whether or not we're actually going to continue the Wingham Police Service. So until that decision gets made again, there's no point even discussing anything. So
Actually, I would like to leave the chair and speak to this issue. Councillors here 4 to 5 years ago thought they had this settled. People of Blythe and East Wawanosh said, no, we don't want the Wingham Police Service. OPP is fine, that they have, especially for East Wawanosh, they have a specialist group for agricultural crime and different things that they can and they have used in the township of East Wawanosh. I don't think it's fair to staff to ask them to keep reanalyzing that there was well over 90% of the people I talked to in East Wawanosh and Blythe were quite content with the OPP, and that's what they wanted. They specifically said, no, we don't want to be switched to an urban policing model. And we have spent a lot of time in the last 2 terms of council going over that. I know Chief Poole put a lot of work into costing analysis about 4.5 years ago. I don't think that our electorate want that done again. I don't want to put staff through that. And I feel that this offering Wingham Police Service to the other 2 wards, that the 2 concessions that had the petition, there was well over 90% of the people on those concessions signed no. We want OPP to continue the way it is. When they have specialized services that will work in the agricultural community, that they're knowledgeable in the agricultural community, I think we have to respect our ratepayers. So that I don't think we put staff to the extra effort of analyzing this again. Councillor Hallahan.
I can only echo what wheelhouse, and I think everybody knows what my position on this is. I don't think we could add any more costs for what it costs for the putting it out for Wingham, staff time, cost to come back, to have meetings, and they don't want it. Wingham want it there. In good favor, this council voted for to let Wingham have their police in good faith. Now, we're seeing what's coming forward. But I'm hearing anyway. In good faith, we thought we were giving them a good deal. Okay, so this should be laid, as far as I'm concerned, this has got to be laid to rest now. No, they don't want it. The same council should respect the people in Clyde and East Wenatchee as they did in Wingham.
Councillor Vauden.
I agree with that. I think that if not everybody, at least 90% of the people in 2 southern wards are deadly opposed to take over by the Wingham Police. In addition to that, I would be concerned. Councillor Seep has suggested that if we were to make this change, there would not be any area rating done. And I think that might last for a year, maybe for 2 years. But it would be so easy to say, well, we better not, we're covering all 3 places. So we'll just break the costs down on an even basis. We don't need that extra cost, and I think that would be another threat. I think we'd be tarred and feathered if we agreed with this. I'm not totally against staff spending a few minutes looking at the implications from a financial point of view, but I would say that regardless of what the outcome of that is, I would be against it, and most people in our wards would be against it.
Okay. You can't make a negative motion. So if there's a motion made on this, it has to be positive
I'm not making
and saying whether it is carried or defeated. Councillor Syke.
So in that breath, I will make, I believe the motion has already been moved to defer it. But once that motion is either accepted or denied, I would make another motion to, a positive motion to this, and then it can be denied again or whatever. I've made a motion to defer it as part of the alternatives. That's what I made the motion on.
Need a seconder?
The motion to defer.
There's no seconder on that motion.
I'll second it.
Okay. And for the motion. Any discussion? Okay. Deferral, you're seconding?
Yeah,
The
I'll
deferral?
second it and defer.
Okay.
Be done.
The deferral motion ends discussion, so that I will ask the question. Those in favor of deferring this at this time? That, did you want the mover, did you want a date of the deferral in the defer until a certain date?
No, because the deferral is be relating to the discussion that's coming from staff.
Okay. Okay. Those in favor of the motion to defer?
Just a moment.
Yeah. That's the question.
Go ahead.
I think I know what he's gonna ask.
Defer means that we're asking staff to look at this along with some of the other stuff. Go ahead.
And I'm gonna throw this out then, when we make it a withdrawal as opposed to a deferral, we'll just withdraw the thing completely. That be okay with you? I think that,
Not for me. It's not.
You're withdrawing the seconding?
yeah, I'm gonna withdraw my second one, on reconsideration.
Dwayne, go ahead.
Well, just in terms of, so we've already passed a motion directing staff to look at alternative in terms of bring back we passed a motion for reconsideration, basically to go back and look at the OPP in terms of what's involved, what the process, et cetera, if I'm not mistaken.
For Wingham.
For Wingham, correct. And then in terms of this motion is, and I think Councillor Knott made a point in terms of this motion speaks to taking the Wingham service and expanding it for Blythe and East Wawanosh. But I think the first question we need to answer is, you know, are we maintaining the Wingham service, or are we going to revisit the OPP? And I think that's a valid point on Councillor Knott's behalf. With respect to the deferral, essentially, from my perspective, deferral would be, or what the deferral would remain in place until such time as council has that initial report, which is the reconsideration. And if council decides to maintain the Wingham service, then at that point, this motion may be appropriate in terms of moving forward with it. The other alternative is so the motion as it is to defer it. The other motion, and what I'm hearing from the discussion, is basically just to vote it down. We don't even want to look at it. So regardless of whether we're going to be OPP Wingham or Wingham Police Service, the other motion for consideration that I'm hearing is just, we're not even going to go there. We're just going to look at policing in Wingham only. Is that capturing what? Okay.
Councillor Site.
So that's the way, so barring the last discussion about not talking about it at all, that was what I was getting at, is we'll defer it till the rest of council determines whether we want to keep the Wingham Police Service at all. And then if the vote comes that we're going to continue to maintain the Wingham Police Service, this deferral would kick in.
Then this would come back on, then this would be considered at that, or could be considered.
Could be considered at that point. That is correct.
Is that clear for everybody?
In talking with the OPP, when they were here doing the discussions, I clearly cornered two of them on this. With the East Wawanosh and Blythe contract change, the fact that they had Wingham with them. And they assured me that our contract would remain the same. Our contract, Blythe and East Wawanosh, would not change because Wingham came on with us.
Correct.
And that's what the Blythe people and the East Wawanosh people want. They don't want any change. We're happy with what we have.
So there's two things here. One is deferral until we get that staff report. The second is, you know, you could say, you could vote, I'm not going to defer. You could then put a motion on the table. You could then put it on the table, the motion as is, and it may be carried or may be defeated. So if you defer it, it basically means you're open.
It's gonna come back.
It's gotta come back. It has to come back.
We don't want it to come back.
So.
So that's what.
So
done.
I would.
I want to know how to vote. I don't want it to come back.
All right.
So
So I
then you could
withdrew
just-
my second. So I'm going to withdraw my position on seconding the motion. So now it stands. If you get another second.
Is there another seconder for deferral? Okay. Okay. Those in favor of the deferral motion?
The deferral motion means
Those opposed to the deferral motion? Motion is lost on the deferral.
So
now we deal
now,
with this.
now we
deal
can
with
make a
that
motion to forever bury the, however you want to word it. I think that is, that's feeling from these is that the topic be put to bed, however you want to word that. Richard? Joanne?
Yeah, so now you can, so if somebody wishes, you can
Yeah.
put a motion, a mover and a seconder for that motion.
Yeah.
And if it is defeated, then, well, the only thing we would be looking at is OPP policing for Wingham.
I'll put forward the motion, you word it how you wish to. Deputy Reed Campbell, seconds.
It's put together.
Is that clear?
It'll work.
You're wording it, Dwayne.
I think the motion, I think it's the motion as is, and the question is whether it passes or not. And if it doesn't pass, then we don't even go there.
Okay. Did you?
Go ahead.
So
Read the motion.
Go ahead.
Yeah, read how you wrote it.
So is the motion that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby directs staff to prepare a report detailing the necessary steps and associated costs to expand the service area of Wingham Police Service to include the Blythe and East Wawanosh wards, and as part of this report, take into consideration the current OPP service level and budget allocations for the Blythe and East Wawanosh wards?
That was the original motion. I didn't get anywhere. So now
No,
we're,
so that was deferred. There was a motion for deferral.
and then,
Now we have this motion. If
We
this
come
motion,
back to the actual motion, when the deferral motion.
whether it's carried or defeated.
say that one again.
Whether it's
slowly.
carried or defeated. So if it's defeated, if the motion is defeated, staff
Okay,
can prepare a
so-
report.
All right, so in other words, you want to defeat this motion to kill it forever, so we're no more rediscussion. Okay, so do you want, does Deputy Reed Campbell understand that? Okay, so I'll make the motion as it is there. He's going to second and then we'll vote on it.
And then you vote on it.
Okay.
You got the mover and seconder? Yep. And I think this one should be a recorded vote.
Yeah, I was just going to ask that.
Deputy Reeve Campbell.
Did you say, Councillor Sight?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. So by defeating this motion, we're okay with sending money to the province when we could send it to North Huron. That's what I'm at. That's what I'm saying. So that's my comment, and we can have the recorded motion as it is.
Do you want me to give you my comment?
No.
People have
well-
lost their faith.
Just a sec.
Okay, I withdraw it.
Proceed when ready, Richard.
Deputy Reeve Campbell.
It's council, the same motion that's right here.
Yea or nay?
No, no,
Huh?
no.
Yea or nay?
No.
Do you support the
no.
motion or not?
Nay.
Councillor Callahan.
You have to say nay.
Can't hear what you're saying.
This right here.
Hey,
Councillor Knott.
Nay.
Councillor Bodden.
no,
No.
Councillor Sight.
I know.
Yes.
Just to do it all.
Councillor Ritz-Machininga.
Yes.
Reeve Vincent.
No.
The motion is defeated.
Motion is defeated. 5-2.
Okay. Okay, now in the fun part, bylaws. Bylaw number 51, 2018. Do you want to read it or do you want me to, Richard?
I can do that. That bylaw number 51, 2018, being a bylaw to authorize the clerk to sign on behalf of council an agreement of purchase and sale between the Corporation of Township of North Huron and 909395 Ontario Inc. for a portion of land legally described as Part 1, Lot 6, registered plan 22R6630, Wingham Ward, Township of North Huron, be introduced, read at first, second, third, and final time, signed by the reading clerk and be engrossed in the bylaw book.
Councillor Sight, Deputy Reeve Campbell, all in favor? Carried. Okay, bylaw number 52, 2018.
That bylaw 52, 2018, being a bylaw to adopt a constitution and procedure bylaw for the live business improvement area, be introduced, read a first, second, third, and final time, signed by the Reeve clerk, and be engrossed in the bylaw book.
Councillor Vodden, Councillor Knott, all in favor? Carried. Okay, bylaw number 53.
That bylaw number 53, 2018, being a bylaw to implement a minimum and maximum charge for the live business improvement area, be introduced, read a first, second, third, and final time, signed by the Reeve clerk, and be engrossed in the bylaw book.
Councillor Syke, Councillor Hallahan, all in favor? Carried. Bylaw number 54, 2018.
That bylaw number 54, 2018, being a bylaw to authorize the Reeve clerk to sign on behalf of council a memorandum of understanding between the Corporation of the Township of North Huron and the Alice Munro Festival of Short Story Committee, be introduced, read a first, second, third, and final time, signed by the Reeve clerk, and be engrossed in the bylaw.
Councillor Ritzman-Tenenga, Councillor Knott, all in favor? Carried. Bylaw 47.
That bylaw number 47, 2018, being a bylaw for the purposes of levying and collecting rates for various purposes and providing for the payment of taxes and to provide for penalty and interest, be introduced, read a first, second, third, and final time, signed by the Reeve clerk, and be engrossed in the bylaw book.
Deputy Reeve Campbell, Councillor Syke, all in favor? Carried. Bylaw number 48, 2018.
That bylaw number 48, 2018, being a bylaw to establish salary ranges for municipal employees of the Corporation of the Township of North Huron, be introduced, read a first, second, third, and final time, signed by the Reeve clerk, and be engrossed in the bylaw book.
Councillor Vodden, Deputy Reeve Campbell, all in favor? Carried. Okay, thank you. Looks like the next thing is closed session, and there's 3 points that we will be discussing. Motion to go in camera. Deputy Reeve Campbell, Councillor Syke, all in favor? Carried.